welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, and guess what? We're going to talk a little real estate. We might even have a little BS and whatever else we can throw in to chat about. Before we get going, I want to do a shout out to the Boston Celtics who last night won the NBA championship. Congratulations to them. We will keep our fingers crossed in the future for the Clippers and the Lakers here in Southern California. But I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company and managing partner of Saywitz Properties. And if there's one thing I've learned in my many years of doing this, it's to try and surround yourself with good people, make informed business decisions, and use the folks around you so that they can help guide you through the decisions that you have to make during the day. And so I'm excited about today's show because we have Mike Arnold, who is Executive Vice President of NAI Capital in Los Angeles, and also, I'm going to get this right, it's the founder and Executive Director, I think, of the NAI Global Corporate Services Group. Mike, welcome to the show. I don't know if I got the title right or not, but it sounded impressive.
It's kind of a mouthful, as my wife likes to say, and my kids, like, can you have an easier title? And titles are only what they are, right? They don't really mean who we are. It's just kind of an example of, I think it's sometimes better to be lucky than good, and I've been lucky enough to put myself in a position to have the opportunity to have those titles.
Yeah, no, on my card it says Master of the Obvious or Assistant to the Assistant. I just kind of keep it simple. So
is that an office, ode to the office type of a comment right there?
Yes, exactly. And so,
got it, love it.
Regardless, thanks for coming on the show. Look, any opportunity to talk about tenant representation or brokerage, I'm all excited, and I've got my coffee and I'm ready to go. I want to start by talking about your history and how you got into the real estate business in the first place. You've been doing it a while, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people I started when I was 12, but I guess when you start to see a lot of the gray hairs and whatnot, that people don't necessarily believe you. So my story is an interesting one. I was actually playing professional basketball in Israel and did that for 2 years after playing at UC Davis in college. And then came back and didn't really know, like a lot of people, when you graduate college, kind of what direction you were going to go in. And my mother had a very close friend whose husband happened to be the head of the Western United States of a small firm you may have heard of called CBRE.
Oh, yeah.
And basically said, hey, there's a bunch of ex-athletes in this industry, and this may be something in which you may want to check out and try. And I had no idea what it was about. But I said, hey, I'm up for it. So started my career, I want to say, I think it's all blurry now when you've been doing it as long as we have, right? Probably 1995 when I came back, 96. And I started at CBRE working in the research department. And this is before the wheel program or being able to figure out what the heck you wanted to do. This is when we were driving around taking Polaroids of buildings.
Yeah, no. Look, I started in 1989, so I'm older than you. And I started in October of 1989. The market crashed in November of 1989. Our research department was a pile of papers in the corner of the office with flyers that people would send, and then I'd say, I have somebody looking for space, and they'd say, here, go through this stack of stuff. But I hear you. I mean, it was walking around, it was driving around, it was
black sky.
Yeah, going, riding the elevators floor to floor, hoping you don't get thrown out of a building.
Right. But that was the good old days of how we started, and frankly, I was writing CoStar reports before there was CoStar. Unfortunately, if I knew then what I knew now, I probably would be retired.
Yeah, for sure. And the terrible thing is no one tells you at the time, hey, the research part, while it's all good stuff, that's not where the money is, right? You want to be the guy on the other side of the coin cutting the deal. Eventually you figured it out.
Then you remember, like, if you're lucky enough to have a broker recognize your work ethic and say, hey, you want to become a runner, we'll let you kind of do everything that we don't want to do. And learn the business. And I had the fortunate opportunity of working with actually a dear friend of mine even today, a gentleman by the name of Stan Gerlach, who gave me the opportunity, who's still in the business, and ironically enough, his son is working for him. And we see a lot of that now in today's market with a lot of, I'm not saying nepotism, so to speak, but, it's nice to have, a parent and a family be able to pass that on. So I started that, did that for 18 months. After that, I came off my runnership, and honestly, I didn't know really a lot about commercial real estate. But one thing I did know is from my athletic background is how to hustle. And I knew I was smart enough to know what I don't know. And that's an important comment. I just want to make sure people in your audience understand. It's important to know what you don't know and be smart enough to bring people in who do. And I had the fortunate opportunity my first year in the business. I was CBRE's National Office Rookie of the Year. I did a volume and very fortunate to be, I probably made over $500,000 my first year, and I had no idea what I was doing. So for your audience, and those are like, hey, how can you do that? There's a method to the madness, and we can get into that a little bit later. So I stayed at CBRE, had a wonderful experience working there with a lot of really smart people, a lot of people who were even in my wedding, like Stan was, and other friends that I still have today. I did that for 9 years. Then I had the good opportunity or good fortune, so to speak, to join my what's now my ex-partner. Had a great relationship with him for 12 years. There's a small little firm at the time that no one really knew about called Newmark. And this was prior to the Grubb and Ellis, debacle where they had their issues. And
Right. So Grubb and Ellis bought Newmark, and then it was a very long name with a bunch of different firms' names mixed in.
Correct. Eventually figured out that Newmark came out of it, had the opportunity to, after being there for a few years, build the office, and ended up being at Newmark for 12 years, where my partner and I ran the West LA office for 9. Had the opportunity to hire, phenomenal brokers. Some people in your audience may know a guy named Jay Lux, who is probably the top retail broker in the Western United States, who we've been friends with for 15 years. And that goes to relationships, right? So our business is about relationships. And Jay had signed a contract. He was like, you know what? Didn't feel like the right fit. And I was like, let's make it happen. And you tell me what you need to help build, and we'll do this together. And, Jay is an unbelievable broker, and he's had an unbelievable career, and he's still there. And then about 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to join a firm that similar to Newmark at the time, which was a regional local firm called NEI Capital in Encino. And they were looking to build their West LA office, and it was an opportunity. Again, it was a challenge. And for me, the company as a whole has grown exponentially over the last 6 or 7 years. We've hired brokers from all the big companies, the Newmarks, the Cushman and Wakefields, the JLLs, and it's basically an opportunity where, besides a better split situation, I think overall it gives us an opportunity to collaborate, share information. Knowledge is power. People from Savills, David Kimball just joined us, who is a 25-year vet, just closed on a $50 million transaction in Marina del Rey. So we have really good brokers with what I like to call a boutique feel with a global platform, which is a really nice appeal to it, to be able to have the autonomy to do what you need to make the right decision on behalf of your clients, provide them the information necessary to make an educated decision. I always say it's not my job to make the decision. It's my job to provide the information for you to make the best decision possible for your company or your firm.
Yeah, no question. And so NAI really has grown exponentially, like you mentioned, and it really is now a global services provider through its own branch offices, affiliate offices, and the different reach. And so I got to assume that, being based in Los Angeles, which is an international community, that you now have the ability to go to other markets and do transactions through the umbrella of NAI, and vice versa, where there's transactions that are coming in from elsewhere.
Yeah, so I've had the good opportunity or good fortune to work with a gentleman in our NAI Mertz office named Fred Meyer, who is our vice chairman of Elite Corporate Services on the industrial side. And they asked me to take on the role of being the vice chairman of Elite Global Corporate Services on the office side from my background and experience. So we work with a group of about 52 unbelievable, not only people, but brokers that are primarily in secondary and tertiary markets around the world. And we have calls every month discussing opportunities, best practices, checking in on how everybody's families are doing, graduation. So it's a great feeling to be able to speak to people and be able to grow a practice. It's something I've always looked forward to having the opportunity in doing. The team I lead here in Southern California, there's about 12 individuals, 13 individuals now on our team from the 12 offices we have in Southern California. And it's the same thought process. It's knowledge is power, and 1+1 = 3. And it goes away from the model where the traditional brokerage, which you have kind of your lone wolf, if you will, that has
Yes.
to go solicit business, process, and close. And there's not enough hours in the day. So we've created a different model to where it allows people to make money in different verticals. But by doing, collaborating, communicating, and saying, who has these relationships, and then collectively we go after business together versus giving somebody the Heisman, so to speak.
Well, and I find the flip side for the client, you're providing better services to the client as opposed to I'm a one and done guy and I made the deal and I got my commission and I'll see you in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
You're really you're there for the long haul. You're providing a variety of services, and if they have a requirement that comes up anywhere, then you have the ability to provide services whatever it need be. And so it cuts both ways. I think it's a better pitch for guys that are on your team, and it's a better pitch.
Well,
when
if you
you're
think
done.
about it, it's like most companies or firms, right? Law firms or firms are not companies, entertainment companies. How do those companies operate internally? That's not one person who's doing everything, right? So they have a team that's going to service different parts of the businesses. And so I may have a person on my team who found an opportunity, but they don't have the resume to help go win the business. And they may not have the ability yet to close the business, hypothetically. So, but they're also going to learn how to pitch business. They're going to learn how to do the deal. So it's not like you set it up and then you kick them to the curb. It's, hey, you're going to learn how to do the business. You're going to process the business. You're going to learn as you're going on, and we're going to help build you for success. And I think that model is the one in which is going to thrive, especially with technology and AI today, and how you're utilizing that and collaborating and utilizing that into your everyday business.
Yeah, and I like to tell people there's plenty of information today. When you and I first started, the pitch of the bigger, larger national firms was that they had all the information. They had the large research department that you were part of, and a smaller firm found it very difficult to compete because you just didn't have access to it. Now you have access to the information. Anybody can go on LoopNet or Redfin and get comp
Right.
information and pretend to be an expert. But what I like to tell people is the information is only as good as what you're able to do with it. And you need to be able to take the information and turn it into savings or a deal or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that's part of the role, I think, of the broker.
And it's funny. We were working on a transaction for a law firm in Century City, and this owner was like, we had pitched first as a competitor, and the competitor basically came and said, hey, they didn't understand what the requirement was. They basically just threw spaces from CoStar to somebody without even talking to the different divisions within the firm, understand it, how they were working internally. And at the end of the day, one of the managing partners said, look, I know the answer, but I have to ask you anyways. We wanted to get like a monument sign on a building in Century City. Is that possible if we're literally, what you're telling us is we're half of a floor? And I said, tell me something that can't be done and I'll figure out a way to get it accomplished. And they said, really? And I said, give me 1 hour. Within an hour, I came back with 3 opportunities that all would provide them a monument line on the signage based upon a half floor of occupancy. And when I came back and told them, they said, you're hired, because this other group didn't even try. They just kind of used us. It was a relationship out of New York. They didn't really think it was going to be a larger transaction. It's really not a huge transaction. It's only about 14,000 feet. But when your rents are pushing anywhere between 60 and call it, $90 a foot in Century City on a gross basis, you're looking at, because we do things monthly here, we're kind of the backwards child in Southern California. That's anywhere from like $5 to $9 a square foot. So when you start doing the math, the transactions can add up.
No question.
They were just very impressed by it. And then the signage we thought we were going to get, we couldn't get. And then we had multiple discussions with ownership. And finally, they're like, well, somebody already has a right to that. And I said, well, heck, If they have a right and they're not even there, why don't you put that signage, give us the opportunity to put that signage where they are, save the money from building uh, a new monument. And if they come there, move us a new monument. They were like, let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Client was thrilled, ownership was thrilled. But those are like the nuances where the client needs to really feel like you're going to bat for them. And there's certain people who are argumentative and yellers or screamers. I'm a problem solver. I like to figure out how to figure out the solution. I don't know necessarily how to get there, but if I have enough ammunition, I'm going to figure out how to put the pieces of the puzzle together, provide a solution that probably is going to be in the best interest of my client.
So let's talk about the market a little bit, because the vast majority of the work that your group is doing in Los Angeles, you're based in West LA, is office space. And so, we've had other shows and we've had people come on and everybody poo-poos the office sector and says, hey, industrial is the place to be, or apartments or retail. And while everything struggled during COVID, it really seems like the perception is that the office market certainly got hit the hardest and has yet to recover. And you see on the news buildings in downtown with the graffiti and other things, but that's really not the case across the board. It's very difficult to make a global statement to say the office market stinks all over. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's the perception of maybe non-professionals who are looking like, hey, we figured out how to do the Zooms and how we did the Teams meetings, and we factored in we can reduce our footprint, if you will, and reduce our real estate expense if we don't have everybody in the meeting. Now, if you're doing code and you're a gamer and you have headphones on all day, maybe that works. But I can tell you, for example, in our profession, and you know this better than anybody, I have 3 interns sitting in my office right now while we're doing the show, listening to this. And if they weren't listening and asking questions and trying to understand what it is that we do, you need people in the office to talk about stuff, to share information. You can't just do everything by technology. Point in hand, I had a conversation, just to pivot real quickly, with another law firm I represent. And he called me last night at 9 o'clock. He is a friend as well. So I create friendships out of my business relationships because I think it's really important for people to really trust you. And he said, I'm having this thought that I'm just seeing it in my other offices and I'm just feeling like we need more space. He goes, I've never been more profitable with the billing I'm doing because attorneys aren't having to schlep out and,
go to meetings and waste time. Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. So he took a little bit more space just on the comm, so to speak, because he knows there are people and he sees it in other offices. And, what people are, what we like to refer to as right sizing or working more efficiently. There's definitely a whole feeling, at least in my opinion, where people are actually coming back to the office a lot more because people like interacting with people. They don't want to interact via, telecommunications or Zooms or whatever it else may be. People like to say, how you doing? And how's your day going? And
well, the collaboration, the interaction. I mean, you can only sit on your couch in your boxers for so long until you get bored.
I mean,
right?
I'm telling you, even though I have a nice shirt on, I'm not wearing shorts. I'm not in flip-flops, although I said I was going to do that today, but my son, who's one of the interns, said that's probably not a great idea, Dad. So
yeah, and we have an intern in our office. I gave him a number 2 pencil yesterday, told him to listen in, and that there'd be a quiz when we're done. So for all the interns out there, write something down. At least take away 1 or 2 things from what we're talking about.
At least the good things.
Right, something. Right, make your day. But in terms of the office market, I mean, it really is segments, right? I don't think there's a question that the downtown submarket, if you will, has really struggled, and in Los Angeles in particular, it's very difficult to get around, to go to meetings back and forth, or even to go to work. And so I find that, like you say, some of the firms are like, look, it's fine, you can just work from home. But I also find that a lot of the smaller firms that are saying, hey, I just want less space, or I want to reduce my footprint, are also not thinking in the long term, right? And so if you're thinking over a 5-year period, over a 5-year lease, things I think will change. I mean, I just don't think that you could say, hey, I'm never going to need this space ever again.
Right. And, there was some commentary probably a few years ago, pre-COVID, where the hub and spoke model, right? So if you're dealing with Los Angeles and you have an office in Hollywood and you have personnel that need to get to like the Sony lot, and you need to get down to Culver Studios, and you're in the entertainment business, maybe you have 2 offices, but then you have redundancies of conference rooms, support, staff, the reception areas, kitchens, and that model's kind of gone by the wayside. I think I don't see a lot of firms doing that. But again, I think it also depends on the market. So if you're in a market and we call it, about 60 million square feet, give or take, going from the West LA market to the heading to the mountains, going down south to El Segundo, going east down to, downtown LA, and going west to just looking at the ocean right now. It's a little overcast today, unfortunately. But when you start looking at that, the drive time it takes to get somewhere, it's difficult. And
Yeah.
I think companies are thinking, how do I make the employees with whom, work with my company or firm more efficient with their time? And it's a time value of money proposition.
And
And
have
then
you
the last
found,
thing I would say is like stay alive till 25 is kind of
which
the
isn't that
mantra
far
these
away,
days.
right? I mean, I think Trump and Biden are both
Man,
saying the same thing to themselves. But is it true in Los Angeles? I know it's true in Orange County based on the transactions that we were working on, at least in the high-rise office and the A-class product, that while you've seen the face rents drop in most instances, especially where there's a decent amount of vacancy, the fact of the matter is you don't have rents dropping from the face all the way down and continuing to spiral down. I think there's a stabilization of where rents are, and then the question becomes if I have a new tenant and I want to make the deal, then the landlord can decide what concessions they want to provide to incentivize that tenant to make the deal. But I think the perception that everybody's pants are down and I'm just giving away the farm, I don't see it from a practical perspective.
There's a couple components to that. So you have first the way an asset is underwritten, right? So you need to understand, and that's another important component that I don't think a lot of brokers really understand, what lenders are allowing owners to do. If the TI package is only X, you have to figure out a way to get around what you can do to reduce your out-of-pocket expense through beneficial occupancy, abatements, whatever that is. So there's that factor of understanding how to structure the deal based upon the makeup of the specific ownership. But to your point, it's like no one's dropping their pants, so to speak. What they're doing is they're saying, hey, I will be as creative as I can through parking concessions, beneficial occupancy because it's an off-book issue, versus calling it actual rental abatement. How we fund certain tenant improvement dollars. Is it a cash issue where we're allocating the capital? Is it, do we want to give you, the tenant, the cash, and then you have to report that as income? I prefer my tenants to get their vendors paid directly from ownership so it doesn't become a taxable event. And then the second part to that is the CMBS market. So you have a lot of these owners who are saying, hey, I got in at a great rate. My loan is coming due. There's all these banks are saying, we don't want all this product back because we know what's going to happen if that goes down. So I think there's that process where the lenders, the owners are trying to figure out how do we do this in a manner that makes sense for us, and then trickles down to the tenant to the point where, I'll go to a lender. It's very rare in today's market, at least historically, where you would actually ask the landlord for their financials versus the landlord typically asking a tenant, right?
Yeah.
So there's a number of times when my client's large enough and I know that I'm doing business with somebody, the first thing I'm talking about is the wherewithal of the landlord to make sure they can fund the TIs, that there's a non-disturb SNDA that I need to get, God forbid there's something going on. So I do a lot of that pre-work prior to even making sure my client sees an opportunity.
Well, and I also find that, as a landlord myself and in talking with clients, as the landlord drops the rent and signs a longer term lease, the value of the building is diminished. And so if my loan is coming up in the next couple of years and I sign a long term lease at a lower rate, I just kick myself in the knees in terms of when I
Yep.
go back to the lender to talk about the value, which is why you have to get creative in today's markets. And then from a tenant's perspective, if I go in guns a-blazing and assume that the market's super soft and I want this, that, and the other, and I want everything, including the kitchen sink, and maybe I'll find somebody who really will give me all of that. I guess that's part of it. But the vast majority of it, I find that the landlords have the same issues that you're talking about, which is I can't give away the farm even if I wanted to.
So that's a really interesting perspective, because I would say a lot of landlords like yourself who understand that, who are obviously really smart, if you're dealing with a tenant, hopefully the representative has a clue, because unfortunately, I would say 80% of the brokers are transactional based,
Right.
and all they care about is jamming a deal and getting a fee done, and don't really hey, this is the comp, and they don't really understand the motivation of the owner. So what I find is and I do have lots of unbelievable relationships with great owners, um, to understand kind of like my fiduciary responsibilities to my client. At the same time, you can't just kick somebody in the pants and say, you got to make my deal or F off. That's not the way the world operates. So understanding your position actually allows me to advise my clients in a more effective manner, because I can still get to the solution I need for my client in a manner that actually doesn't hurt you. So at the end of the day, it becomes a compatible situation, not an adversarial one.
Yeah, and I found it has to be a win-win to some
Yeah.
respect. It can't be a win-lose, because otherwise you're just not going to make a deal. And even the largest, most well-heeled of landlords have investment partners, have lenders, and have constraints. Just because you have a bunch of money or you're a big company doesn't mean you're going to do everything I ask you to do.
Right. I mean, there's got to be a give and take. So as a tenant rep, you have your wish list, and the items that you don't necessarily need, but you want. And then as an owner, you know what I can do and what I can't do. And so it's the dance, right? You figure out how to get there. You create the leverage on behalf of your clients. And hey, the world's your oyster. I do really believe it's still a very tenant favorable market today. Um, there's another client I was in the market during, 2.5 hours yesterday, and she literally says to me, she goes, "This is a great time to be a tenant, isn't it?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And she's like, "I'm actually thinking about buying it now too, because I've been leasing, for so long that I think it makes sense for me to acquire a building." And so we have a new finance division at NAI as well. So shout out to Peter Steigletter, and he's the CEO of our NAI debt and equity and hard money lending group. So now we have another resource within NAI to be able to outsource some of that work, so to speak, to people to help clients make educated decisions.
So I want to talk real quick. We only have a few minutes left about the Century City market. That seems to be the anomaly, and then maybe also the stuff closer to the beach in Santa Monica, in the sense that that market is very tight. That market is in high demand, and you really have some ridiculous rents relative to other places around town. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'd say actually what's really interesting is downtown Santa Monica is actually not as strong as people think. The whole promenade is blown up. Macerich giving back. Um, Pretty sure he gave it back. I think I heard it yesterday or the day before. Another owner on the sold 7 buildings on the promenade. Like downtown Santa Monica is not your dad's downtown Santa Monica or your mom's downtown Santa Monica anymore. But as it relates to Century City, strongest market arguably in the country right now. And I think also there's a couple of factors. One, you have strength of ownership. You have a lot of institutional ownership. You have a couple family ownerships, but have been very in the business very long time, very well heeled, a lot of depth, a lot of deep pockets. Safety. Let's talk about Santa Monica and the homeless issue there too. I mean, it's awful. I mean, people unfortunately doing things in the middle of the street. I'm not going to get into politics of everything today, but Century City is a safe environment. People know they're going to go to work. They're going to be in a safe environment. You may have a tenant who says, "Hey, I was in 50,000 feet paying, you know, $4 coming out of a lease, and now the market may be five, and I don't need 50. I can get into 35 or 40, and if my rent goes up, the net at the end of the day is the same rent I was paying, and if I can afford to pay it, I afford to pay it." They just did probably the biggest deal on the merger with entertainment companies and JMB's asset that'll be up probably in 26, realistically 27 with delays if it happens. You know, you have CAA and ICM in the merger, and that's, north of 400,000 square feet that they pre-leased. Net effectives $10 a foot. I mean, face rate's probably 12, and that's a monthly basis. Those are big freaking numbers. So private equity firm just leased 150,000 feet in the same project coming out of Santa Monica, leaving 233 Wilshire.
And,
So
and I find that
it,
Century City has a combination of professional, like law firms and investment firms, combined with the entertainment aspect, right? It's not
yeah,
just one, whereas downtown maybe it's
correct.
more law firms. And then the geographics of it, you can pretty much get to most places. It's centrally located.
100% accurate. You can get on Olympic or Pico, you can go east, you can go west. We're over at 11150 Santa Monica. Shout out to the Irvine Company on the 15th floor that we ended up subleasing from B. Riley. Amazing space. We're in about 8,000 square feet here. But literally I'm looking out my window and I can see the 405. So I can get anywhere that I need to, down south, go east, go to the valley from here as well. So I just think the quality of building, the quality of ownership, people want to feel safe, especially in, unfortunately, West LA in today's market.
So, I would say, look, from a tenant rep perspective, we use the pitch all day long. I'm sure you do too, right? Hire somebody, make sure it's the right choice and that that person's going to add some value, whatever it is that they do, whether that's information, negotiating skills, all of the above. For those folks out there that are thinking about doing something in the real estate in terms of leasing or buying or whatever, get yourself a good broker. If you're in LA, Mike and his group, top notch. And Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us and talking about the market and the company, and wish you and your team and your family much continued success.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, so I am Barry Saywitz again, still, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in for Let's Talk Real Estate. We will be back here next week doing the same thing, talking about some other cool and exciting stuff. I want to thank all the folks at OC Talk Radio, as always, for helping us to put on the show. Mike, thanks again. We'll see you back next week on Let's Talk Real Estate.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.